What if the very people you trusted most betrayed you? What if the place meant to destroy you became the very place God used to lift you? This is the powerful story of Joseph, a man rejected by his brothers, forgotten in prison, yet raised by God to save an entire nation. Joseph was the favored son of his father, Jacob. As a sign of this deep love, Jacob gave him a beautiful, multicolored robe. This symbol of favor, however, wasn't a blessing in the eyes of his brothers. It became a source of deep-seated jealousy. Their envy grew even stronger when Joseph began sharing his dreams sent from God, where his entire family, including his parents and brothers, bowed down to him. But where Joseph saw a divine message, his brothers saw only arrogance and pride. And in their hearts, hatred began to take root, waiting for a chance to grow. That chance came one fateful day. Joseph's father sent him to check on his brothers, who were tending the flocks in the fields. As they saw him approaching from a distance, their resentment boiled over. "Here comes the dreamer," they sneered. The plan formed quickly, fueled by years of bitterness. They seized him, violently stripped him of his precious robe, and threw him into an empty, dry pit. Their initial thought was to leave him there to die, to silence his dreams forever. But then, a caravan of slave traders appeared on the horizon. An idea sparked: why let him die when they could profit? So they pulled him out of the pit and sold him. Just like that, Joseph was sold into slavery for 20 pieces of silver by his own flesh and blood. He was carried away to a foreign land, Egypt alone, betrayed and utterly powerless. But even in this moment of absolute despair, God was with him. In Egypt, Joseph's life as a slave began. He was purchased by a man named Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's high-ranking officials, the captain of the guard. Though Joseph had lost his family, his freedom, and his home, he had not lost his character or his faith. He worked diligently and honestly, and God blessed everything he did. Potiphar saw this. He saw that this young slave had an extraordinary touch, that prosperity followed him. Soon, Potiphar trusted Joseph completely, placing him in charge of his entire household. Everything Potiphar owned was under Joseph's management. For a time, it seemed Joseph's fortune was turning, but his journey was far from over. Trouble found him once again, this time in the form of Potiphar's wife. She desired Joseph and tried to seduce him, but he refused, honoring both God and his master. Enraged by his rejection, she lied, falsely accusing Joseph of the very thing he refused to do. Potiphar, believing his wife, had Joseph thrown into prison. Think about his journey, from a favored son to a betrayed slave, and now to an innocent prisoner. It looked like his life was spiraling downward into darkness. Yet, even in the depths of that Egyptian dungeon, God had not abandoned him. Even in prison, Joseph's divine gift remained. God gave him the ability to interpret dreams. His fellow prisoners, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker, both had perplexing dreams on the same night. Joseph, with God's help, accurately interpreted them. The baker, as Joseph predicted, was executed. The cupbearer, just as Joseph foresaw, was restored to his position in Pharaoh's court. Before the cupbearer left, Joseph made a simple, desperate plea. "When things go well for you, please remember me and get me out of this prison." The cupbearer promised he would. But once he was back in the comfort of the palace, he forgot. He forgot the man who gave him hope in the darkness. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months stretched into 2 long years. Joseph remained in prison, seemingly forgotten by everyone. But he was not forgotten by God, who was orchestrating a plan far bigger than Joseph could have ever imagined. Then one night, the most powerful man in Egypt had a dream. In fact, he had 2. Pharaoh dreamt of 7 fat cows being devoured by 7 skinny cows, and then of 7 healthy heads of grain being swallowed by 7 withered heads. He woke up deeply troubled. He called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but no one could tell him what the dreams meant. The kingdom was in a state of confusion and fear. It was then, in that moment of national crisis, that the cupbearer's memory was jolted. He suddenly remembered the Hebrew prisoner who had perfectly interpreted his own dream 2 years earlier. He confessed his failure to Pharaoh and told him about Joseph. Immediately, Joseph was summoned from the dungeon. He was cleaned up, given fresh clothes, and brought before the mighty Pharaoh. Standing before the king, Joseph made it clear, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." With wisdom from God, Joseph explained that the dreams were one message. Egypt would experience 7 years of incredible abundance, followed by 7 years of devastating famine. He then advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise man to collect and store food during the good years to prepare for the bad. Pharaoh and his officials were astounded. They saw the Spirit of God in this former prisoner. Pharaoh looked at Joseph and said, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" In a single breathtaking moment, Joseph's life was completely transformed. Pharaoh declared, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Joseph was given Pharaoh's signet ring, fine linen clothes, and a gold chain. He was lifted from the prison floor and made the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. From chains to authority, from rejection to a divine purpose. The years passed exactly as Joseph had predicted. 7 years of bountiful harvests came, and under Joseph's wise administration, massive amounts of grain were stored. Then, the 7 years of famine began. It was severe not just in Egypt, but across the entire region. People from all over the world came to Egypt to buy grain because only Egypt had food. The famine also struck the land of Canaan, where Joseph's family lived. Hearing there was grain in Egypt, Jacob sent his 10 sons, the same brothers who had sold Joseph into slavery, to buy food. When they arrived, they were brought before the powerful Egyptian governor in charge of the grain. They bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. In that moment, Joseph's childhood dream came true. They didn't recognize him, this powerful ruler, dressed as an Egyptian, speaking a different language, but Joseph recognized them. He held all the power. He could have taken revenge. He could have let them starve. But instead, he put them through a series of tests, not to harm them, but to see if their hearts had changed. Finally, after seeing their remorse and their love for their youngest brother Benjamin, Joseph could no longer control his emotions. He sent everyone out of the room except his brothers and broke down, weeping loudly. He then revealed his identity. "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" His brothers were terrified. They were speechless, paralyzed by fear and guilt. The man they had betrayed was now the man who held their lives in his hands. But what Joseph said next reveals the incredible heart of God's redemptive plan. He told them, "Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." He spoke the words that have echoed through history. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph forgave them completely. What his brothers started with an act of evil, God finished with an act of glorious redemption. The story of Joseph is a powerful testament to God's sovereignty and his unfailing love. It teaches us several profound truths. First, God's plans are always greater than human betrayal. No matter what people do to us, they can never stop God's purpose for our lives. Second, waiting does not mean God has forgotten you. Joseph waited for 13 years in slavery and in prison, but God was working behind the scenes the entire time. Your period of waiting is not a period of punishment, it's a period of preparation. And finally, what was meant to break you, God can use to build you and to bless others. Joseph's suffering wasn't pointless. It positioned him to save his family and an entire nation. Your pain is not wasted. Your waiting is not in vain. God can turn your deepest wounds into your greatest victories. If this story has encouraged your faith, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful Bible stories, faith-filled lessons, and daily encouragement from God's Word. Click that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope. Keep trusting in God's plan, even when you can't see it. Thanks for watching.